Of the Body Condemned,
You are
Chapter
suggesting
5,
I am stuck with
Reflection,
you all forever
by
then?
Lady of Rosefire and sparxwrites. A conversation. A conclusion. Content tags for graphic depictions of violence, execution, road hauling, torture, aftermath of torture, flogging, hanging, strangulation, gibbets, vomiting, urination, fighting, rescue missions, crying, healing, hurt/comfort, hairpetting, nightmares, emotional hurt/comfort, wump, dislocations, bruises, trauma, near death, tenderness, physiotherapy, and hand-holding. His dreams are as unsteady in this unconsciousness as they were in the last. He is back in his cell, chained, bound, the stench of his own terror and sickness thick in his nostrils. It is dark. Dark enough that even his sensitive eyes cannot see through the swirling blackness. And then there is light, a single point of it, cherry red and glowing in the corner of his vision, getting closer, slow and inexorable, until he can no longer see it, but can feel the heat of it against his heaving ribs. He tries to struggle, but he's chained tight, thoroughly restrained, and is weak, besides from the long weeks of torture and deprivation. His chains hiss and rattle, but he cannot move, and the heat is getting closer, and his skin is starting to prickle with sweat, and the heat is still getting closer. He would scream, but his tongue is numb, his jaw shattered and aching, and he cannot make a sound. There is nothing to do but lie there. Nothing to do but take it, helpless, as the cherry glow touches fire to his skin. It presses deeper, sinks into the spaces between his ribs, lights him up from the inside out with pain, and he still cannot scream. Something touches his face. Essek jackknives upright, snapping one hand out and rasping a command, the stink of burning flesh still in his nose. The orange cat in front of him registers at the same time as the pain in his hands, and just a moment before he realizes that he has turned Caleb's familiar into a grease spot. Slowly, he looks up. Caleb stands in the doorway with the tray in his hands, shock and concern flitting over his face before it settles on resignation. None of the anger that Essek had expected.
Well?
Sorry.
Essek croaks. He cradles his hands against his chest, fighting the urge to whimper like an injured animal and crawl into the corner of the room. A dream. It had been a dream. Only memories twisted and warped. His jaw had not been broken until later, and the heat in his lungs had been first infection and then healing magic. But his hands still shake, and he cannot dislodge that acrid, meaty stink. Caleb sets the tray down on the floor between them and reaches for a pocket.
Do you mind if I resummon?
Essek flinches before he can stop himself.
Not right now, please.
He cannot quite keep the tremor from his voice. The only response is a nod, and that is good. It is normal, and as such, more comforting than any assurance that Caleb could have offered. Essek suspects he knows this. He eyes first Caleb, and then the tray. The food and the tea on it might smell good, if not for his dream. He reaches for the teacup anyway. Curling his fingers makes them throb, and he fails to hide his hiss of pain.
Could I help you, please?
Caleb asks. Essek pauses to clear his dry throat, to hide the sharp bite of humiliation at his own helplessness.
I can feed myself.
I am sure you can, but I will feel better if I can help. And Jester will be glad to know you are not alone. It would be a favor.
I don't need to be cuddled.
Ploy is so obvious. The reframing of who is aiding who, the weight of Jester's investment in him, and the idea of her being upset. Essek regrets the rejection as soon as he gives voice to it, but he cannot take it back.
No, you do not.
Caleb acknowledges. He hesitates, then reaches slowly toward him, palms out and empty.
But I am concerned. I would like to set my mind at ease. I will do nothing but steady the cup if that is what you want. Please, Essek, you do not have to do this alone.
Essek eyes him for a long second, and then reaches out, lightly touching his fingers to the center of one of Caleb's palms.
I'm not hungry. Not now.
Some tea, then. The rest can wait.
If it will keep Jester at bay.
The ache in Essek's hands turns hot and sharp as he curls both of them around the mug. He sets his jaw and forces himself to lift it, to bring it to his mouth, to hold it steady for long enough to take a sip. Some of the tea spills as he tries to lower it again, dampening the front of his borrowed shirt. Essek swears once, in Undercommon, and just barely manages not to drop the cup on the floor. By the time he manages to set it down safely, unsteadily, his hands are cramping viciously, stabs of pain through his palms and up his wrists. Caleb's lips twist, and he withdraws a jar from an inside coat pocket. It is squat, made of clay, and sealed with waxed cloth and a cord fixed beneath the lid. There is no label.
May I?
He asks, holding it up. Essek frowns.
What is it?
Beeswax, some herbs, some oils, for the pain and the stiffness. Caduceus made it.
He opens the jar, and the smell of summer and sage drifts through the room.
If you would rather I called for him or for Jester,
No. This is fine. You are fine.
Essek slowly, reluctantly holds out one of his hands, mouth pulling into a tight line at the swelling around the now healed breaks, at the raw new skin that covers them.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The salve is dark gold, and nearly as thick as wax. Caleb warms it between his palms. Tiny flames flicker over the backs of his hands for a moment, and when he draws them apart, the salve has turned half liquid. Slowly, Essek extends his hands. Caleb takes one carefully, between both of his, and Essek cannot keep from flinching. He is not accustomed to touch in general, and for the past few weeks. There was no kindness in any of the touches he received down in that dark and awful cell.
It is the least I can do.
Caleb glances up at Essek's face, and his eyes are apologetic.
This will hurt.
I am sure I will survive,
Says Essek dryly, setting his jaw against the discomfort. There's a hitch in his breathing as Caleb starts rubbing the salve into his skin, though, that he cannot entirely hide. It does hurt. Caleb's not wrong. But it's a dull ache, almost healing in a way, and it does ease the pain and stiffness a little. That doesn't explain the sudden urge he has to burst into tears, though, or the fist that's suddenly taking up residence in his throat. He stares fixedly at the wall, trying to memorize the cracks in the tile and keep his breathing steady with little success. Each push of Caleb's calloused fingers against his palm sends a twinge through him before the pain eases. His other hand curls into a loose, aching fist in his lap, restless. Caleb reaches his fingers, and Essek catches the inside of his cheek between his teeth, pressing down hard enough to remind himself to stay quiet. Compared to everything else, this pain is nothing. But the urge to scream still claws at him. Caleb draws at his ring finger, and Essek finally snatches his hand away. He inhales sharply and then forces himself to exhale slowly through his nose, to straighten from where he is hunched over his throbbing hand.
It will pass,
He murmurs, unsteadily, more to himself than Caleb. He'd kept himself almost sane with those words in the dungeon, though then he'd assume it would pass when they finally grew tired and killed him.
It will pass.
It will.
Agrees Caleb, a frown creasing his forehead. Essek offers his hand back. Just as gently as before, Caleb takes it, slowly working the salve into his smallest finger before exchanging that hand for the other.
Bo said something about finding clay to build your strength in your hands again once you are ready.
He says softly.
But only when you are ready. Do not worry about being of use to us. They do not think like that. I do not, when it comes to you.
He imagines Caleb would know. They are, after all, quite similar to one another, both used to weighing relationships and transactions and favors. At least Essek thinks he succeeded in keeping copies of his spellbooks tucked away in their pocket plane, though it had cost him dearly. That, at least, will ensure his usefulness after he is healed and well. Essek shakes his head, trying to clear it, and finds Caleb's eyes on his face. He glances away, unable to bear the intensity of eye contact right now.
You know what this is like, I think. Yes. The aftermath of...
He pauses and swallows.
I will be fine. Am fine.
Caleb sighs.
I do. It will not be easy, but they make it better.
He looks toward the door, an indecipherable expression on his face.
They love you very much. Even if we are putting ourselves at risk, we will not stop. Not for someone that we love.
Lux and that's... Essek swallows, suddenly unsteady. There are 4 rows of colored tiles on the wall cutting through the black marble. He counts the ones he can see until the dizziness fades, and he can draw a smooth breath again.
Your friends choose to put their affections in the strangest of places,
He remarks, eventually, after his stomach stops churning somersaults at the enormity of what Caleb has just said.
I am aware,
Caleb lets out a soft, hoarse laugh.
but we are better for it, no? I am grateful to them.
They pass another few minutes in quiet as Caleb works his way along Essek's fingers. He cannot stop the occasional hiss of pain as Caleb's fingers dig into a particularly tender spot, but he does not cry out again. When Caleb has finished, his hands no longer feel half broken. He flexes both of them an inch at a time, teeth gritted, and he does not need to scream. They do ache, still, especially around the joints. He imagines will for a while. He imagines the scars on his wrists will last for a long time, too. Cuffs he will not be able to shake off. It would be pure vanity to ask Jester to remove them, but he does not want to carry these, to be reminded every time he sees his hands of what has been done to him. At least he cannot see the mess left on his back. Perhaps he will take to wearing gloves. Caleb rubs the residual salve into his own hands, and then pushes the tray of uneaten food over to Essek, expression hopeful, a furrow dug into his brow. Taking the spoon is clumsy and uncomfortable, but not as painful as it would have been before the massage.
The salve helps.
Says Essek, a little reluctantly.
Thank you.
I will pass it along to Caduceus.
Says Caleb, with a crooked little smile that pulls at the corner of his mouth. The suppressed delight in his voice is charming, in a strange sort of way.
And you are welcome.
They sit together for a while, in silence, as Essek eats the lukewarm porridge in tiny bites. Carefully, cautiously, as though his jaw might break again, or his stomach rebel. Perhaps both. The latter certainly feels like a distinct possibility still. Between that and his unsteady hands, the consumption of even a spoonful is a painful, protracted affair, punctuated by intermittent noises of frustration and discomfort that slipped out through his gritted teeth. Caleb does a passable job of pretending not to watch, and of pretending that he does not itch to help. It is irritating, and simultaneously unsettlingly endearing that he is even bothering to pretend.
I don't know how to thank you and your friends.
Says Essek eventually, when he's managed a few mouthfuls. The porridge sits heavy and uncomfortable in his stomach, almost nauseating. But the smell and taste of food after days, weeks of deprivation is waking his long-neglected sense of hunger, and the urge to devour the bowl as fast as possible is suddenly strong.
I don't know how to pay you back for what you've done. I do not know if you even realize what you have done. What you saved me from.
The words taste sour in his mouth. The fact that he had to be saved at all is something he would rather not acknowledge.
Let us help you.
Says Caleb almost immediately, voice low and earnest.
Be our friend. I do not know what else we can ask of you.
He looks at Essek, deliberate and lingering, and it feels as though he is looking into him. Caleb's eye contact, uncommon though it is, always feels like a knife against his skin. Too incisive, too knowing. Caleb's jaw works, and he looks away, and Essek breathes again with a sudden heave of aching lungs.
They saved me, too, you know.
He says, quietly.
Not from execution, but from myself. From people who would have seen me dead or worse.
I am sorry,
says Essek quietly, and, to his surprise, finds he means it.
You have only shared a fragment of your history with me, as I have shared only a fragment of mine with you. But I gather that the world has been cruel to you.
He reaches out to touch the back of Caleb's wrist, a faint brush of crooked fingers over a scattering of reddish hairs and the start of an old, bone-white scar.
You do not deserve that. You are a good man, a kind man.
Caleb shakes his head, blinking rapidly.
If I am, it is because they have made me so.
He tips his hand palm up under the touch, curls his fingers gently around Essek's. The warmth of his skin sinks bone deep into Essek's joints, soothing the ache of them more effectively than any salve.
I try to be worthy of them and the faith they place in me.
He looks up and meets Essek's eyes, and there is, again, that same intensity in them. Essek knows, briefly, what it is to be a butterfly pinned to a board.
You see, then, what is to come. They will not let you run away from them or from yourself. And it will be painful in some ways, but you will heal with time.
You are suggesting I am stuck with you all forever, then?
Says Essek, the hint of a smile curling at the corner of his lips. His fingers tighten around Caleb's hand in an unsteady, determined grip.
Yeah, more or less.
Caleb returns the smile, small and hopeful.
It is as Veth said, welcome to the Mighty Nine.
Thank you guys for listening. I freaking love Caleb and Essek so much. This was a pleasure to narrate and edit, and our freaking voice actors are all amazing. Thank you everyone for listening, for supporting, for commenting. We live off of your feedback. If there's a fic you want us to do another series of, let us know. We're looking, we're trying to figure out what to do. Go check out all our other amazing content. We play tabletop games, we do sketches, short form improv, a bunch of other stuff on anywhere you can find audio or visual content at Rewind and Replay. Thanks for listening. Have a very merry holiday season. Bye.